Hello, I'm Chiranjit Sengupta, and you're here with me at the 9th OPEC International Seminar in Vienna. We are here at the Energy Connect studio, which is a media partner of the seminar, and I'm delighted to have sitting next to me in the studio today, Jarad Daniels, the CEO of Global CCS Institute. Jarad, it's such a pleasure to have you with us in the studio.
Yeah, my pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You are the CEO of the Global CCS Institute. Can you talk to us more about what the Institute does?
Sure. So the Global Institute was started up by the Australian government over a decade ago with a mission to accelerate the commercial deployment of carbon capture and storage as one technology needed to help address global climate change and climate change mitigation. And so it's an international think tank, member-based with about 200 members now, federal governments, subnational governments, a lot of private companies in the energy and in the carbon capture and storage space. All working together to progress carbon capture and storage deployment and focus on the critical issues to accelerate that deployment on a global basis, but really, regionally by region, focusing on what are the most critical aspects and how do we work together to help move things forward.
That's an excellent overview. And CCS has seen a lot of support in the recent years, but also some pushback from some quarters.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts, and how do you see the future of technologies like carbon capture?
Sure. Well, thanks for the question. I've been doing carbon capture and storage work for 25 years or so, starting with the U.S. Department of Energy and my roles there, and then moving to the Global Institute. And so, I think if I go back in time 20 years ago, carbon capture and storage was seen as a way to decarbonize hydrocarbons in the stationary electric power sector, right? The world ran on coal back then. Over half of the U.S. electricity came from coal. China was just starting its growth curve. And so, the conversation was, well, CCS is absolutely required to decarbonize electricity. And then the conversation shifted about a decade later to say, look, the same technology and skill set required to extract hydrocarbons, oil and gas from the ground, is the same expertise required to put CO2 back into the subsurface, into the geosphere, and prevent it from contributing to global warming. And so the conversation shifted to, well, oil and gas community is essential to deploy CCS at gigaton scale, right? Which is what all the climate math said was the appropriate role. And really in the last 5 years or so, we've heard the voices coming in from the so-called hard-to-abate industry, the cement industry, the steel sector, that have no other technology choice, right? Even if they drive their processes with 100% green or renewable electricity, the chemistry of the process emissions still emit CO2 is part of their overall process. And so you absolutely need CCS to decarbonize those industrial point sources. And I think that has really progressed the conversation globally at the COPs and elsewhere, where whether you like it or whether you don't like it, the math says we need gigatons of deployment of carbon capture and storage, both from point sources and, if we believe we're woefully behind where we need to be, the carbon dioxide removal technologies like direct air capture or bioenergy with CCS to meet our mid-century climate targets. And so I really do see this momentum and the shift toward embracing CCS alongside renewables and efficiency and nuclear in countries where that's socially acceptable, really part of that all of the above systems approach to stabilizing our climate goals and helping to decarbonize all assets of society. And I think we've seen that in terms of growing interest from the investment community, where there's supportive policies that are durable to allow investment to flow. And so the finance sector has really leaned forward into this space. The insurance industry is now providing a number of products as well. And we see a lot of this activity, I think, in the global north. It's interesting to think about, and I think we've had some conversations here at the OPEC conversation and workshop the last 2 days about how does the global north work with the developing countries and specifically in the global south to make sure that all forms of clean energy and low carbon energy technologies are deployed globally, just not in the more affluent countries.
No, that's a very interesting point, and that was going to be my next question about, you said CCS is absolutely necessary, especially in the H2A industries, like where they're struggling to sort of decarbonize. But is enough being invested, and what are the investment pathways, if we can dive deeper into that?
Sure. Is enough being invested? I think the answer is no. We need to do more, right? And you can make that same statement if you take a step back to say all forms of low carbon. Is there enough investment? No, we need to do more. And it's really, what is the need and really the responsibility of developed societies, both governments and the private sector, to to help others that are going to come before us and behind us in this journey. And to me, as an engineering perspective, again, how do you optimize that from a system perspective? That's absolutely critical. If you look at demand growth projections for for energy, for electricity, those are relatively flat, although artificial intelligence is causing that to curve up. Yet in in developing countries, you see this really exponential growth, and so there's an opportunity there to invest in low carbon technologies at the very beginning, right? Whether it's in the energy sector, whether it's in new industries that are being built, and so we see that as one of the demand structures, demand in developing Southeast Asia, for an example. You see a lot of interest and growth in development and deployment in China, as an example, at megaton per annum scale projects. And we see, the efficiency of these large CCS networks, hubs and clusters, around industrial point sources, for example. And in Saudi Arabia, around Jubail is one great example. To me, you see this investment where people realize we need to continue to provide these energy and energy services. We need to provide commodities just in a lower carbon footprint form. We want the energy security. We want the product security of having these manufacturing capabilities in our own sovereign territories, with the economic certainty and the jobs and all the other co-benefits that come along with keeping that industry alive where it's at. And so we do see that driving a lot of interest in CCS, alongside all the other technologies, right, that we see. So it's nice really to see that overall conversation shift and really embrace the appropriate role of carbon capture, utilization, and storage alongside everything else we need.
That's a fantastic point. And to go back to one of the points you made earlier about the expertise that is required, because as we deploy this technology moving forward, do you see any kind of skills gap that the energy industry needs to address and fulfill?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. And I think, if you take a step back and again look at the enormity of the challenge in terms of increasing energy demand, increasing demand for lower carbon services all across the board, we're going to need the next generation to have a tremendous amount of skill sets in this area. It's not just for carbon capture and storage, but for all forms of new energy production. And so for the CCS components in specific, right, you're going to need engineers for the above ground capture kit. You're going to need folks with expertise in the subsurface, geologists and geophysicists to understand the fate and transport of CO2 when you put it in the subsurface, and where are the best, most economic, most secure places, and how do you prove permanence, right? And so those are, just two technical skill sets that are going to be required. But we're going to need, more project, developers. We're going to need more financiers. We're going to need more project managers of all types, to do this at climate relative scale. These are really, really large capital intensive projects that require all, different skill sets to work together to get the job done. So absolutely, if, the world is going to get serious about dealing with climate change mitigation, we are going to need, the next generation to have a lot of tremendous skill. And it's interesting to think about, how AI and, other tools that are now becoming available can help all of us, right? How to find that balance of how do we provide energy and energy services, how do we provide energy security, and how do we have, environmental performance and specifically, low carbon performance all integrated together from a systems perspective. It's really interesting to think about.
That's a brilliant insight, Jarad. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for coming down to the studio.
Oh, likewise. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for watching, and you can get more studio interviews like this and comprehensive coverage of the energy industry at energyconnects.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and I will be back with more studio interviews from the OPEC International Seminar in Vienna. Until then, goodbye.